All right. So I would like to welcome everybody to today's edition of the Step Up Your Safety series here at RAS. I'm Therese. I am your moderator. I'm also joined by our client services managers, Grant and Trevor, who will be doing the presentation on decoding the alphabet soup. They are going to talk about work comp acronyms. As we get started, just a couple of things. You've all entered with your phones and your computer audio muted. If you do have questions that come up as we go through the information today, feel free to use the Q&A feature and type your questions in. We will address those at the end as time allows. And I will leave it to the guys. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Therese. Yeah, like
Mhm.
you said, my name is Grant Kadansky. I am a client services manager here at RAS. I've been around RAS for a couple of years, but I've been in the insurance game for about 10 years in a few different lines between work comp and disability and a little bit of auto. So a lot of these abbreviations cross genres as we go, but we have a pretty exciting and engaging presentation for you today. I'll let Trevor introduce himself when we get to the next slide, as he's about to go. But I want to kick off with an example of a claim note or two that you may come across. Ideally not. To preface, this is actually a very exaggerated example, and something we generally do not want our reps to be submitting, as there are a plethora of abbreviations in these. But it really drives home how confusing it can be when we're using too many, as well as indicate just the variety of abbreviations you may come across when you're looking at claims. As a side note, if you ever do see a note like this, please let us know. We try to make sure our reps are using much more understandable plain text. So we would like to know if you do ever see anything this extreme. We will revisit these later on in the presentation, and hopefully at that point they'll make a little more sense. We can read through.
Perfect. So, like Grant said, my name's Trevor Charbonneau. I'm one of the three client services managers here at RAS. I've been with RAS now for the last 2 years. Prior to coming to RAS, I actually worked on the insurance agency side of things and have been in work comp now for the last 10 years. So, what I'm going to talk to you guys about today is just the most common work comp acronyms. And we're going to start off kind of easy with WC, which stands for workers' compensation. That one's kind of self-explanatory. If you ever see WC, just know that stands for work comp. Next one is EE or IW. These are interchangeable with each other. If you ever see EE or IW, just know we're referring to your injured worker or that employee that was hurt at work. The next one I have is employer, which is ER. So if you ever see claim notes where someone's talking about you guys at the employer, typically it'll be like, I have a follow-up call with the employer scheduled for 2 weeks from now. Those are the type of notes that you'll see. Now we're moving to the three different types of claims in workers' compensation. The first one that I want to talk about is just incident-only claims or IO claims. These are often referred to as report-only claims as well, or RO claims. These are the claims where there's been no medical paid on these workers' compensation injuries and no lost time paid. So if there's no payment on your claim, that claim is going to be chalked up as an incident-only file. The next acronym I want to go over is MED or MO claims. These are medical only files. These are claims that have no lost time paid on them, but do have medical paid. So your employee saw treatment at a medical provider. We have a bill to pay. We paid that bill, and this claim is now going to be considered a med only file. And then last but not least is the indemnity or lost time claims, sometimes referred to as IND claims or LT claims. These are the claims where your employee is taken off work past the waiting period. All states have a different waiting period. My three primary states are Minnesota, Iowa, and Wisconsin. They all have a 3 day waiting period. But then there's Nebraska and other states that have a 7 day waiting period. But all in all, if your claimant is off work for more than that waiting period, that claim is going to be classified as a lost time or indemnity claim because we need to start paying lost time benefits to that injured worker. The next bullet point I have is first report of injury. This is the initial injury report that you send to us at the carrier to let us know that an injury has happened. When you send it to us, our adjuster gets the first report, and then we can start working that file. The last bullet point I have on the screen is FNOL, which is first notice of loss. This is, for example, if you were made aware that an injury happened today, but the injury actually happened yesterday, the first notice of loss would be today. So that's my first slide. We can go to the next one. So here are some continued other most common work comp acronyms. The first one's DOI or DOL, stands for date of injury or date of loss. This is the day that your injured worker was hurt at work. Next is recorded statement. You're going to see this a lot in the claim notes online. Our adjusters do recorded statements when injuries do happen, and they'll label it as such in their claim notes. Next one is WAR or ROA. This stands for Workability Report or Report of Workability. I don't necessarily like WAR as an abbreviation because there's negative connotations there, but in general, these are just the doctor's notes that your employees get after getting hurt at work. They'll either say we need to take the employee off work, they're working with restrictions, and just give you kind of an update on that employee's medical treatment. The next one is AOE or COE, and these stand for arising out of employment or course of employment. Most likely where you're going to see these type of abbreviations are when we're trying to decide if a claim will be compensable or not. We need to make sure that this injury actually happened within the scope of your employee's employment. And if it doesn't, it may end up being a denied claim or an accepted claim if it does arise out of their employment. The next one we have is F-U, which is just follow up. Again, this is something you're going to see in the claim notes from adjusters. This one's kind of universal. All adjusters will put this in their claim notes. So if for whatever reason you're looking on the portal and you see F-U, just know we're talking about follow up. The next one is RTW or ERTW. This stands for return to work or expected return to work. You're going to see these a lot on workability reports or notes from your adjusters, letting you know that the employee is expected to return to work on this date with or without restrictions. That's primarily where you'll see these. The next one is FD or LD, which stand for full duty or light duty. Again, this kind of comes from the report of workability, but our adjusters will label them as full duty or light duty depending what type of restrictions your employee does have. And then my last bullet point before we go to disability benefits is OV/NOV, which stands for office visit or next office visit. Um, Again, these kind of come from the report of workability or the adjuster's knowledge of the claim, just letting you know when that next office visit's scheduled with their medical provider. And with that, we're going to go to disability and I'll turn it to Grant.
Perfect. Yeah, so I want to go over some of the most common ones when it comes to the benefits we're going to be paying. If an employee is out, we've already gone through some of them, or we'll get to the medical side as well. Really, the first four on the slide here can be confusing and they can get mixed up pretty often. We have PPD for permanent partial disability, PTD for permanent total disability, TPD for temporary partial disability, and TTD for temporary total disability. I'll give some examples of each of these just so it hopefully clears it up a little bit. Permanent partial disability. A good example of this would be, say there was an injured worker who had a torn rotator cuff, but now because of that rotator cuff, they're never really going to quite be the same, and they have a lifetime lifting restriction of 25 pounds, so as to not re-aggravate the injury. Another example of permanent partial would be like a minor amputation, say somebody lost a couple of fingers or just something where obviously it's permanent. They're not getting it back, but they can still work, but just at a partial level compared to where they were previously. Another example would be like chronic soft tissue injuries, like a herniated disc, where they're going to have, again, generally lifting restrictions. An example of PTD or that permanent total disability, these are going to be the catastrophic injuries, stuff where people are no longer able to work. From that point on, whether it's vision loss from a chemical spill, major amputation, and God forbid somebody had to lose both arms in a bad car wreck, traumatic brain injuries from repeated concussions, stuff like that. Ideally, we don't see that, but every now and again, those do come through. TPD for temporary partial disability. This is probably the most common. Something like a sprained ankle where they can't weight bear for a week or two, or they need to use crutches. Minor concussions where maybe an employee can't use screens for a limited time before they come back full duty. TTD, that temporary total disability. This would be more like broken bones, surgical recovery, not able to work at all for a time being. They will be back to normal eventually, but for a little while they cannot work at all. They are totally disabled for that time frame. My next point is LOEC or LOE for loss of earning capacity or loss of earnings. Really, this refers to the loss of the employee or injured worker's ability to earn income at the same rate as they were before the injury. A lot of times that comes into play with those permanent disability ratings. IR or an impairment rating. Impairment rating is basically a percentage-based medical evaluation that determines the extent of an individual's permanent physical or functional loss. You'll generally see this at the end of a claim once an individual has reached end of healing as an additional indemnity payment. AWW for average weekly wage. This is information we will generally be requesting from the insured to properly calculate any kind of lost time payments. If they are out of work beyond the waiting period, which is next, then we need to calculate how much money that benefit is going to be. So WP, that waiting period, Trevor had touched on this, where different states have different waiting periods. It's a period of time, generally between 3 to 7 days before work comp benefits kick in. So an employee will have to be out of work for 3 to 7 days. Sometimes it's consecutive days. Sometimes those days can be broken up. Again, completely depends on jurisdiction. There are also some state differences where if they are out long enough, that 3 to 7 day wait period can be paid retroactively as well. Again, depends on where you're at. The last two, last day worked, LDW, and FFDO for first full day off. Those are used when calculating that waiting period, depending on when the last time they worked, when that date of injury, the DOI was, or that first full day off is how we're going to figure out when the wait period starts and when those benefits will begin. I will also handle some common medical abbreviations we deal with on a day-to-day basis. PCP, that you'll come across is your primary care physician or provider. OT and PT, occupational therapy or physical therapy. Generally, occupational health is where we would recommend employees to go after an injury. You'll see a lot of different people where they go, but occupational health or occupational health facilities are just more familiar with work comp. A lot of times they'll be a bit more detailed when filling out work restrictions or return to work forms to give a better idea of what kind of duties an employee can still do, really what their ability is, not necessarily just writing them off fully for a set period of time. ODG, the official disability guidelines. It's an evidence-based medical treatment and return to work guidelines. Really, it helps to give a structure for our claim reps to help estimate how long recovery might be or what an employee can expect when it comes to healing and rehab. Obviously, every individual is unique. Every claim is handled on a case-by-case basis in conjunction with what the physician's recommendations are, but the ODG helps to create a level starting point and some framework to work with and to give expectations. PPO, the Preferred Provider Organization. Generally, this is where we're going to set up a network where you would prefer employees to go. Ideally, it fits within any kind of healthcare, any kind of medical coverage, or if there are specific physicians you would prefer somebody to go. In some states, you can direct care. In others, it's more of a recommendation or a guideline where you say, "Hey, if you if you want ideas on where to go, here's our preferred provider that we'll point you towards." An IME is an independent medical examination. These can be advantageous to get an objective third-party medical opinion. Really, that helps avoid any kind of subjectivity from medical records if we're seeing it. It can also help solidify a compensability determination. MMI, maximum medical improvement, and EOH, end of healing, similar meanings for those two. That's the point where the employee is good to go. They're back to as good as they're going to be. If it's back to where they were before the injury, great. If it's more of the permanent total or permanent partial disability, it's really as good as they're going to be. After MMI or EOH is achieved, that's when any kind of impairment rating from the previous slide is going to be applied. And hopefully the employees are then heading back to work full duty. FCE, a functional capacity examination. This is a comprehensive assessment that measures physical capabilities, movement, endurance. and so on and so forth. Generally, these are conducted to determine work readiness or the ability to return to those job duties. The QRC or the NCM, this is a qualified rehab consultant or a nurse case manager. They are assigned to assist with medical appointments, ensure treatment is appropriate, help converse with providers, and help clarify restrictions, really to help an injured worker navigate some of the more complex situations with providers. There's also a FBCM or a field-based case management. They're very similar to the QRC or the NCM, but those professionals are generally located within the provider's location. So they don't necessarily have to go somewhere to be at those appointments. They're already there in the location. A UR or utilization review. This is part of the QRC, NCM, all of their duties. That's a process to determine if the treatments that are being prescribed are medically necessary and appropriate, or again, to help push along the healing and the process and really help clarify that everything's going the way it should. And then I'll kick it back over to Trevor.
Perfect. Thanks, Grant.
Mhm.
So I'm going to talk about the rating bureaus and some underwriting notes throughout the claims process. So the first one I have is NCCI. This is the National Council of Compensation Insurance. And this is really the main national organization that sets the rules regarding workers' compensation and classifications in general. This is also the bureau that releases your work comp experience ratings. Moving on to MWCIA and WCRB, these are the bureaus that are state specific. So instead of using NCCI, Minnesota has their own, which is the Minnesota Work Comp Insurance Association, and Wisconsin has their own, which is the Wisconsin Compensation Rating Bureau. So all the mods that are released from these organizations all look a little bit different, but they're all doing similar things throughout the work comp process. The next one I have is DOLI, which is the Department of Labor and Industry. And this just regulates workers' compensation at a state level. And moving on, we have DWD, which is Department of Workforce Development. And I don't want to say they do the same thing because they do not, but they're also involved in state oversight of work comp programs. Now, these ones we're kind of moving on to is UW for underwriting and LC for loss control. A lot of the times you're going to see these notes in your claim adjuster's notes, and it'll just be referring to internal parties, whether it be at your agency that has a loss control person or internally for us at the carrier, referring to underwriting. Then the next one I have is MOD or EMR. This is the experience modification rating. This one is quite complex and large. We could have a whole separate meeting to talk about the MOD by itself. But I'll give you kind of a base understanding of what the MOD is for you. So again, these are released by NCCI, or if you're in Minnesota and Wisconsin, MWCIA or WCRB. And 1.0 is the average mod. No matter what industry you're in, if your mod's at a 1.0, you're doing as well as the state expects you to be doing. If your mod's above a 1.0, you're doing worse than the state's expecting you to be doing. So you're going to pay more in your work comp premiums. If your mod's below a 1, that means you're doing better than the state expects you to be doing, and you're going to get a credit on the premiums that you pay back on workers' compensation. And then the last one I have is NAICS, which is your industry classification codes. So these are just the class codes of your employees to determine what type of business you're running, and really the class codes to determine what your employees are doing at work. This is another thing that goes on your experience rating, that determines how much you're paying in your premiums. With that, I am going to turn it back to Grant to talk about some legal things.
Perfect. Got a few more, and then we can revisit those nasty claim notes from the beginning. So legal stuff. ALJ is the administrative law judge. That's the kind of judge that we will normally see handling work comp claims. They generally perform hearings and resolve disputes between citizens and government agencies, but they also ensure the fairness and transparency in work comp denial reviews, disability, and a wealth of other things on that side. An RFA, or request for authorization. This is a pretty blanket term for an approval form. It can help provide access to medical treatment information, medical records, power of attorney, any other records such as like auto information as well. But that's one that you'll see for either RFA. Sometimes you'll see it referred to as MedAuth or medical authorization to get medical records from a provider. MSA stands for Medicare Set Aside. This is a financial agreement that allocates a portion of an injury settlement to pay for future medical expenses. CMS is the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. That one's relatively self-explanatory. That's just the primary organization that handles those two services. Depo, you'll see depo sometimes in the claim notes, just means deposition. This is the legal procedure where witnesses or other involved parties provide their sworn testimony before the hearings. FFC is a full and final compromise. This is when we're handling it's a permanent settlement of a claim, where the injured worker or the involved party is they're giving up any rights for future benefits or claims regarding that injury or issue. Normally, it involves a lump sum payment, sometimes a resignation. Really, it's just kind of the end all be all of a settlement. And finally, SOL, statute of limitations. This can refer to a deadline for a couple of different things. One, it could be notifying the employer, an injured worker notifying the employer that a claim is needed or that an incident occurred. It can also be the deadline for formally filing a claim with your carrier. The time frame varies widely depending on state or jurisdiction. A couple of examples, I'm not going to go into all the details for all of our states, but two examples. One of them, Minnesota, there's a range of between 14 and 180 days for an employee to notify their employer, depending on circumstances, obviously. Or when it comes to formally filing a claim, you can have up to 3 years, sometimes up to 6 years, depending on those circumstances. That's one of the more complex ones. A second example is Wisconsin, where you have 30 days to notify the employer of a claim, 2 years to formally file a claim. Pretty cut and dry. And that's all I got for legal. We'll kick it back.
Perfect. So we're revisiting the example Grant showed earlier. So like Grant said earlier, we do not advise our adjusters to make notes like this. If you see anything like this, let us know because this is kind of a ridiculous example. And just for the record, I don't have any notes in front of me on what this says. So if I screw anything up, you'll know. But I'm going to go ahead and read this out now after going through our presentation. And after this, we can do any questions that you guys may have. So, reading this from the top, it's call out with injured worker to obtain recorded statement. Employer submitted first report of injury indicating last day worked was 5/12 with a return to work date of 5/22 on light duty with restrictions. The employer left voicemail for injured worker with no answer. This is an indemnity claim. Okay, moving on to the next one. I did that one pretty flawlessly, I will say. The next one is need to confirm average weekly wage with employer to determine temporary partial disability, temporary total disability rate. Obtain medical records and report of workability from primary care provider. Injury was within the course of the employment. We will pay the bills once received from primary care provider. The surgery date is unknown. Review for impairment rating. Is a nurse case manager or independent medical exam necessary on this file? We will refer to loss control to review the incident. So that
Nailed
was
it.
just a little fun thing we wanted to put in there, and you can kind of test yourself on this too in the future. But moving to our last screen, we just want to ask you guys if you have any questions, explanations needed on any of the abbreviations we covered, or come across any other abbreviations in your day-to-day that we didn't go over that you're curious on.
I don't have any questions yet, but I thought of one and it might be a little tricky. So I'm going to run it past you guys.
Okay.
WCID.
I think that's workers' compensation identification, but Grant, if you have any.
That's what I believe as well. That would be, and Therese, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that is the card that we send out at the beginning of a claim when a claim is filed. Am I on the right path?
Well done. Well
Perfect.
done.
So that is a card we send out at the beginning of a claim. As soon as a claim is filed, it gets emailed to generally both to the injured worker and to the employer. It has information on there about where bills can be routed. It has pharmacy information, so they can take it with them immediately to really kickstart those benefits and make sure that there's no pending payments just hanging out there.
It's one of those I get asked a lot because it's in your portal with a little button
Mhm.
that says WCID. So thank you.
Nice.
And we still don't have any questions. You guys must have just
You
handled
nailed
it.
it.
Good
Well,
You
this is
job.
handled
like one of those
every
topics where there's less questions, but The good thing for you guys is you'll have access to this presentation in some
Yes.
capacity. So if you ever come across anything that you're unsure of, just refer back here. Hopefully it'll be helpful.
Mhm.
If you have any questions about the presentation, you can reach out to Grant or Trevor. Their information is on the screen. Thank you for joining us and for being our partner, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.